awesome.
Well, hello. We're about 3 minutes late. I'm sorry for any of you that had to wait, but I have a guest on the line, and I wanted to explain a little bit about why I'm calling this Housewife Radio. If you're from an older generation, housewife did not always have the derogatory meaning that it has today. It just meant that you were in charge of someone's house and you were his wife. But over time, for instance, towards the late 60s, early 70s, people were saying, "Well, I'm not married to my house, so you can't call me a housewife." But that's all that it meant, was you were in charge of the man's house with whom you were married. And so I'm going to go back to calling it Housewife Radio, and just wanted to explain that in case you had any doubts about what that meant. And so today I have Robin on the line again, and she's so patient. If you've ever had someone trying to record you or film you, and they want you to say something over and over, they'll say that again, only say it a little louder, or say that again, only be more cheerful. I sometimes have had that happen to me, and you feel kind of ridiculous saying the same things over and over. So she's graciously come back. So I want to go to her and talk to her and ask her to go back to a comparison she was making to me about what her life was like when she was out working, her personal habits, her mentality, her approach to life, her finances, her spiritual life, her relationship with her children, all these different things, and a relationship to her house. So, Robin, if you're ready, I'll just let you go ahead and talk.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lydia. When I first came home from my job, what had happened was the company that I was working for had actually pulled out of the state that I was living. So that job was gone, and I tried to get a small business going. But when I came back home, there were so many things that wonderful surprises that I found. Everything from there was the hurry that I always felt before, getting housework done before I went off to work, and then I'd come home and I'd be in a hurry, and my whole attitude was hurrying. And when I came back home, what I found was that I began to really enjoy my day, and things like, just simple chores in the house became just there just became a nice flow that happened, instead of this hurry up, jam it, get it done so I can get out the door. And so, I started making more involved dinners. As far as involved, when I mean more fresh ingredients, where I always made dinner at night when I got home. But before it was doing what I could as fast as I could, and now I'm getting recipes where I'm using much fresher ingredients and like that. And just my whole attitude is not rushed anymore.
Yes.
I enjoy when I wake up, I enjoy the day. I'm not slamming into the day anymore.
Yes. Yes, and I've heard this from several women too. And by the way, if you've just tuned in, we're trying to get the live chat going, and I don't have anybody to help me, so I'm sitting here alone trying to manage about 3 different screens. And if you've just joined us, this is not intended for you to stop and listen. If you've got something you need to do, it's so that you can take your device and go around and sort some things or clean some things or do what you, even if you just want to sit down and have a cup of tea. So we don't want to make it a time where you're taking time off from what you need to be paying attention to. You can have your children around, and you can sit or you can move. And so, Robin, the other thing that that I noticed that you had talked about before was your personal attention to detail in the way you live and the way you move, the way you act at home. You have more time to think about your coming and your going and your actions and your movements in the home.
Oh, absolutely. And I thoroughly enjoy my slowed down, just that slowed down pace where I'm more thorough when I'm doing things at home. And I'm more thorough when I'm thinking through purchases. because I'm not in a hurry, and now I'm at the store, and now I got to make a decision. Okay, I'm going to grab that. I am far less of a consumer, yeah, for lack of a better way to say it. Um, and I put far more thought into purchasing. Um, and just things like hang drying my clothes now, so my dryer's not eating them up because I have the time to do that. And when I first came home, I loved new clothes. That was my one weakness, if you will, was new clothes. And when I came home, I can honestly say I did not mind giving that up. Now, do I still buy an occasional clothing here and there? I do. And, but once again, now when I'm out and I'm looking for something, I can say, you know what, that's too much. I think I'll wait till that goes on sale. And so periodically, if I'm out, then I'll check and see if it's gone on sale. Where before, I would just grab it and buy it.
Yes, and I think we all kind of lived under the illusion that if you didn't get it, it would be gone. And my
Yeah.
attitude had to change to, if it's gone, God will provide something that I need somewhere else.
Yes. Yes.
And so,
And I feel like I have such so much more time for my children. My children are grown, but your children always need you. And when my daughter would call me if I was at work, now my daughter was always very respectful of my work schedule. She would call me and say, "Mom, do you have a second?" But I could always tell in her voice I needed to have a second. So I'd say, "Sure," but there'd be always that conflict going on in my mind because I was at work. And I did have very much a conscience toward my employer. And so, and I could tell there'd be this need in her voice, and I'd listen as much as I felt like I was. And then I'd say, honey, I'll call you back tonight. Well, that's no longer going on when she needs Mama. We talk for sometimes 2 hours now. We talk during the week, and it's no more of this, oh, got to get off the phone, honey, I'll call you tonight, and then the moment's passed, and my grandchildren. I have spent so much more time with my grandchildren, and it's wonderful. I am learning so much about them since I've been back home and getting to know their habits and their personalities and having them over, and so my personal relationships have grown.
yes. And if we could work at home, or I don't like to call it work. Yes, you are working, but it's an existence at home that's a whole realm of life. If we could have a conscience about that, about how much we owe our Lord, to use our time wisely, to be good stewards of our husband's money and of our possessions, and that because we're building a family legacy, we're building something to pass on to the next generation. We're creating a history too, and it's not all about, you mentioned consuming. You could even become a consumer living at home if all you're thinking about is things, for your home.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
And
And I picked some. There were some things that I picked back up, but I quit sewing when I was a teen. When I moved out of the house, and I never purchased a sewing machine or anything, and I just quite frankly didn't have time, quote unquote, because of always being out in the workforce for a lot of my adult life. And so what happened when I came back home, my sister sent me a sewing machine, and I went, oh, and actually, Lydia, it was what inspired me. I had it a couple of months, and I went on your blog, and you had sewn this lovely dress, and it had the most beautiful lines, and I was just inspired. I just said, you know what? I need to start sewing. And so, and it's just been wonderful.
yes, and I think sometimes people get there's been a stereotype of housewives, homemakers in the past. I remember in order to get women mobilized out of the home, a lot of things were said on any kind of media, whether it was magazines or radio or television or what, to depict the housewives of someone who didn't wear dresses or dress up. They had no reason to dress up, and they were considered very unappealing, unattractive, and not of any influence, and of no value. And so what I was trying to do on my blog is to show that this place that you're in is like you're just like the queen of a castle. You are dressing for everyone around you. And I remember somebody asking me, "Did you get when I was younger? Did you get dressed today?" And I said, "Well, my husband's going to be gone for 2 weeks, and I'm not going anywhere, and no one's going to see me." And she said, "Well, you get dressed and get your hair fixed, and because your children will see you, and someone else will see you, and at home, the Lord will see you. You dress your best at home too."
Mm.
So let me
Yes, I agree.
So let me ask you some more things that you had mentioned about the way that you approach your finances and your economy. When you're working outside the home, it's more tempting to be efficient and fast than it is to take the extra time to sew something or save something that's food or whatever.
Yes. In fact, I realized after I came back home how much food I ended up throwing away. I mean, that sounds funny, but we'd get to the end of a meal, and it's one thing if there was a pot left over of it, and I'd say, okay, we're going to have this tomorrow night. But if there was just like a half a cup left over, I would toss it. And I don't do that anymore because I take the time to now to put it in a little 2 cup freezer thing and put it in my freezer, and I've always got stuff going into the freezer. So when I'm home now, because I'm home at lunch, I eat a lot of leftovers from the week before or the week before that's been frozen. So if I have just a couple of tablespoons of taco meat, I throw that in the freezer, and then a couple of weeks down the road, I'll get that out in the morning. I'll thaw it, and then put it on a salad for taco salad or something like that. So I've been far less wasteful with food, and also my thought processes for thinking out dinners and okay, I'm going to pick up cabbage for this dinner, and now I'm going to use cabbage for dinner 2 days later. Also, those types of thought processes, I'm so much more thorough now, thinking through all these things.
Yes, thinking through all the steps of I often say, I was mocked for this all over the web one time when I said in a blog post that yes, dinner does take all day. When people say, well, you're staying at home, but what's there to do that takes all day? You could be out working. But if your thought process is working as to the various steps, this is going to cost you. Where am I going to get the food? Then I'm going to bring it home. Then I'm going to have to prepare it, cut it up, and do all this to it. I was thinking the other day that it actually starts at the beginning of the day. You start to think, okay, what's the end of the day going to be like, and what are we going to have for dinner?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing that I really discovered after coming back home, I always had my morning devotions before I'd go out the door. However, they were like my cleaning. They were like, okay, I'll praise the Lord a little. Then I've got this little grocery list. I got, okay, God, all my children and my, if I had a friend who needed prayer or whatever. Now I'm praying for the nation. But it was very succinct, very short, and very, get it out of the way because I've got to get my housework done. Now I got to get to work. And what I found, and I've been home almost 2 years, and what I found was my prayer life has changed because now in the mornings I have more time for the Lord, but also during the day, I find myself talking to the Lord, and it's more of a conversational atmosphere that I have. Now, when I was at work, if I had a coworker that was having a problem, or if I had a customer that was having a problem, I would shoot a prayer up in my mind, but it was a 30-second prayer.
Right.
But just the other day, my sister and I were talking about how you can have a more conversational during the day because you're actually you're not under a boss or where you have to think, okay, now I can only think this in my mind and I'll just throw it up real quick. And now during my day, it flows in and out of my day, just thinking about, praying about this or that, or, just kind of talking to the Lord.
Well, this we could probably do an entire different radio show just on the power of prayer, because you know, it's such a relief if somebody were to call me and say, I just want to know, do you have any needs that I could pray about for you today? That'd be a greater gift than if somebody came and brought me a present. It's just wonderful that someone would take their time
Mm,
out to pray for someone else. That is just amazing. And as rushed as the world is, it starts to impress me even more, as rushed as everyone is and all the things they have to do. They would take time out. That's a good ministry. And one of the dangers I think of that women run into at home is they don't think they're doing enough, and they want a ministry, and they want to be out doing things, maybe even outside the home, to help other people. But the best thing you can do is stay at home and help your husband and help your home and help your own relatives, because it keeps them from having to be a burden on other people they're not even related to, and
mm,
it gives them my mother is not living anymore. I don't know if yours is, but when you don't have a mother anymore, you don't have anyone to go to. So you start to realize this as you get older, that you are of value to minister to those others in your family.
I agree.
So I wanted to ask you
I
some,
agree.
and I wanted to ask you some more about your just your personal observations of being in the house at certain times of day, which you would not have seen when you were at work, because your house stays empty while you're gone. And you had mentioned some of these things that were very interesting.
Just some of the things that I noticed were, it sounds funny, but the sun or the snow or the weather, and during different times of the day when I'm in, as the sun comes up and then goes over our house and goes on the other side, and there are just some things where I just stop during the day and I think, oh, how lovely. Even if it's raining and there's a cloud burst, and then all of a sudden, there's just water streaming down. I just stop and I look out my window and I go, how cool is that?
Yes.
And I just never had time to do that before.
Well, as a matter of fact, so many of us when we were younger that thought it would be kind of neat to go to work and earn our own way, that and our parents expected it of us in some respects. We didn't really get to work with people or anywhere where we could actually look out a window. And I remember as a
Yeah.
child sitting on the floor. My mother had never had a job outside the home. She did things that she could to help. She sold her eggs at home, and there were things from her garden, and there were many things that she did. But I remember sitting on the floor as a young girl, playing with something, and then noticing this sunbeam and all the little bits of dust in it coming through the window and playing across the floor. And I thought how sad that is,
Mm.
that, well, when women go to work, they don't get to see things like that, but children don't either so much. So I
Yeah.
just, and then I wanted to ask you about your relationships with people now. How has that changed since you've been home?
Oh, it's been wonderful. I've gotten to know my neighbors so much better. I have a neighbor who lives behind us. There's an alley between us, and I would have never gotten to know her as well as I have had I been at work. And in fact, that very neighbor, when we first moved into the neighborhood, we moved across town about 4 years ago, and when we moved uh, into this neighborhood, I was working and I saw her at Walmart, and I was actually on an errand for my work. And she stopped to talk to me, and she could tell just by my body actions that I got to go. And she's going, oh, and she apologized to me. She goes, well, hello, Robin. First, she wanted to talk, and then all of a sudden she tuned in right away that I was in a hurry. And I said, oh, I got to get back to work. I'm so sorry. And I really did have to get back to work. I couldn't take a lot of time with the errand. But when I drove away, I felt so bad because I really wanted to talk to her. And
Yes.
just, just getting to know my neighbors so much better has been such a pleasure. And before, when we lived across town and I was working, I can honestly say I barely knew any of my neighbors.
Yes. Yes, and I think that we owe a great deal to our husbands. We really should compliment them for giving us this opportunity. I know I live in an area where it's really hard to find a neighbor. There's more property between the houses. It's in a farmland, but I even lived in neighborhoods where there were no neighbors home, so it's very hard. But when you do have that opportunity, you're so grateful that you weren't stuck in an office somewhere. You can't really minister to some of these people, and we really
Yeah,
owe a great deal to them to that they provide for us. Um, and I'm not saying that everybody's wealthy, but the fact that they provide for us so that we can um, create a social life for them and for us is very important. Housewife serves a very, very big role in social things in the world, and they don't really know it, because once they got taken away and put in the workplace outside the home, they got taken away from their neighbors, they got taken away from their children, they got taken away from their relatives.
yeah. I agree, Lydia. I agree. And thank you for that comment. Amen. I love it that my husband brings home an income. And every once in a while, either at dinner or I'll text him and I'll thank him for being such a wonderful provider of the home and
Yes.
allowing me this. When I first my job first went away, I actually tried to start a small business, and thank goodness I hardly put any money into it. I mean, it was just one of those, and I knew the niche was really, really tiny, and I knew there was a chance it wouldn't take off. But I was scared to death about our income because I pulled in about a third of our income. And it's almost 2 years later, and what floors me is how we've been. The Lord has just provided at differing times when I've gone, oh boy, here we go, and then I'll say, okay, Lord, I help me here. There was a point where we really needed tires, and I was going, Lord, we need tires, and the Lord provided for the tires, and so God has really been faithful. Because a few years back, actually how it all started was a few years back, the Lord had highlighted Titus 2 to me. And I had read it, I don't know how many times I had read Titus 2. And all of a sudden, when I was reading one morning and I saw what the older women to teach the younger women, and then it says to be busy at home. And I just went, that jumped off the page at me. And it thrilled me because I always loved home, that I didn't know it was okay to come home before retirement age. And for me, that would have been, at that point in time, that would have been another 13 years. And I didn't know it was okay to ask for that. So that jumped off the page. But what I did, I didn't know I could just pray to come back home. What I thought is I had to somehow replace my income with some entrepreneurial thing, and I'm not naturally an entrepreneurial person.
Yeah.
So what happened was I began to think, well, should I try this? Should I try that? But every time I would try to think of something, that there were just those pitfalls where I'm going, I don't think I can, pull this off or pull that off. And so what happened was the Lord in his mercy just kind of booted me out of my job.
Oh.
And it was one of those things. I came home and I tried to start a business and it didn't go, but God is faithful. And, he highlighted that verse to me for a reason. And that was, he was saying, you know what? It says in my word for, the women to be busy at home. And so I'm so grateful to the Lord for going ahead of me and covering me on so many things, coming back
Yes.
home and realizing God's very faithful.
Well, I think that you made a good point about being more careful with your finances. When your husband is the provider, and you realize what a privilege that is, that he's taking care of you, you start to guard his income, and you also guard it from other people too, trying to take advantage of it or any kind of expenses, and he starts to trust you because he knows that you're guarding his income.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
also,
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you a question about how, after working so long, you got into some good working habits at home or routines at home where you would have just a balance of rest and work and how you manage your home. How did you, because I understand you'd be used to doing it after work or before work or on weekends. Now, how did you manage to spread it all out throughout the week?
So when I came home, the first thing that happened was I realized I could take my time, and I loved that. I wasn't, just, you know, when I go to clean the bathrooms, it was far more thorough. And then the other thing that happened, and I think I can tell in my health that I've started doing this. I've started resting in the afternoon. I never had that before. And after lunch, I will sit down, and if I fall asleep for a little bit, great. If I don't, I'm still sitting there resting. And I can really tell a difference after 2 years in my health from resting. So that resting is actually now a part of my day. And I think it's wise for women to rest. The other thing that happened is I began to pick up things like my grandchildren coming on Tuesdays. I have quite a few grandkids, and so what happens is we said, hey, let's take one grandchild at a time, so they have that one-on-one. And so I rotate my grandkids. Now I have them other times too. It's not like it's dyed in wool that it has to be on Tuesdays that they come over. But every Tuesday I do pick up a grandchild from their house right after school, and then I bring them home, and then we do things together. I have one who loves to bake. And so all of these little things started adding into my day. I just found a brand new women's Bible study that I'm now a part of. Really enjoyed it last week. And these are women that are studying Titus 2 in particular. So that was just really cool to find that out. And so I think just things expanded. I have no problem filling my day. I can honestly say that. I mean, there are times where I'm doing stuff and all of a sudden I look and I'm going, oh my God, it's time to start dinner.
Yes.
So.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I've had women ask me, well, if I decide to stay home, what am I supposed, especially the young women that have never had a home or been married, they'll say, well, if I decide to stay home, what am I supposed to do all day? Well, I think that eventually, if you're home, even let's say you have to stay home for some reason or other, you eventually start creating work for yourself. You'll take up knitting or sewing, or you start doing uh, something that, even if you bake a cake or fix a meal, you're going to have to clean all that up. Now that's going to take some time. The preparation is going to take time. So yes, you'll have no trouble finding things to do at home.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And Lydia, another thing that I don't miss, and that is the constant pressure between a boss and home. If they need you to work later hours, or just small things like getting sick, it was a trial. Every time I get sick, it was this trial because the boss would want you to be at work, and you go, I can't make it into work. And if your sickness lasted more than a couple of days, sometimes your boss would get upset with you, and they'd be suspicious, like, well, are you sure you can't come to work? And so there were a lot of little conflicting things that would happen that created underlying pressure on a continuum between the fact that, my husband is my head, and yet when I was going out to work, I had another head also over me called my boss. And so sometimes those things would come in direct conflict. Now, it didn't happen a lot, but when it would happen, it was uncomfortable. And I had worked for an institution where I had a woman boss who was absolutely devoted to her job. I mean, she was one of those people that was there 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. But what was hard was she didn't understand why other people didn't want to live for the institution that were under her. And so that there were conflicts, that kind of became a conflicting thing in my heart. That's
Yes.
that I don't have to. That's no longer there anymore. I love it.
Yes, you aren't divided. You know how the Bible says no one can serve two masters, for either he'll hate one and love the other. And all that really meant, it was a figure of speech, meaning one of them is going to get less attention than the other.
Yes, absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
so now, can you give us? I don't know how much longer you want to stay on here. We've already been on here maybe 30 minutes. Do you want to just say one?
Up to you.
One more thing, maybe about how do you start your day? I'm sure, like everybody else, it isn't the same. I mean, people say, well, what do you do in the morning? What do you do in the afternoon? Do you know we're very flexible, and we might have in our mind a kind of structure, but we're open to changes. If our husbands need us, we can get in the car and go get them if they need something or that sort of thing. So, what would you say about to someone who said, well, what am I supposed to do all day and how do you start? How do you get started?
Well, Lydia, I love that you asked this question because really, when you are at home, the moment you wake up, you're the boss. I mean, other than if the Lord prompts you or your husband asks you, I mean, you really are the head of your, castle or cottage, or, you're kind of the person that gets to decide. And I just think that's exciting. After being under bosses for years and years and years, where everything was dictated from the minute you got into, a person really is, has a lot of freedom when you're at home. And so and like you say, Lydia, my day looks differently sometimes, but when I get up in the morning, it's morning devotions, and then I go for a walk, and I love getting out in the crisp air, and then I come back and I kind of start my day. I take the shower, and then I launch into my housework. And my ebb and flow to the day is I try to get my housework done by the afternoon, and in the afternoon then I'm freed up to do a little more, take my rest, and then do a little more pleasurable things like sewing or playing music or whatever. And so my day can change. Actually, when I first came home, I had to actually get out of the time clock mindset. I had to have been the most boring person on the face of the earth because I had such a time clock mindset that I really had to break out of, because I would wake up and I think, oh, I got to do this, this, and this. And I remember I had set days for doing things like Mondays is my, for my bathrooms and, toilets and like that. And then if Monday would come and my schedule was thrown off, I would actually, believe it or not, panic. And I began to realize that was my mindset. It was really, and to break out of that, I am so happy that I am breaking out of that mindset where I have this time clocked thing. And I would really, if someone would say, hey, do you want to go to coffee or something like that? I would literally think this, well, gee, now let me see. I don't want to make it before I don't want to make it before 10 o'clock in the morning, because then I won't get this or that done. And then I begin to think, that is ridiculous, and how boring is that?
Well, yes, and if our time is if we get used to our time being monitored and everything we do being monitored, it's very hard to have self-control. It takes a lot of self-control to create your own, okay, now what am I going to do next? And of course you're thinking, what is the most urgent thing to do right now? Well, you don't do that at someone else's workplace. You think your home is so totally different. You're in tune with what needs to be done for the purpose of the well-being of everybody else there. And so if you get used to having everything monitored, it's a very hard thing to break out of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate you coming, and I wanted to make sure we went 35 minutes. And so, if anyone's interested in listening to something longer, we could plan a longer one. But I so appreciate you coming on. You're so gracious. I just love your sweet voice, and I love everything that you have to say. And I hope everyone will leave. I'll put the link to this on my blog so you can listen to it again because it will be recorded. So I want to thank you very much, Robin.
Well, and thank you, Lydia. And your blog, it really has ministered to me. I found it a few months after I came home, and I was greatly encouraged. I'm so glad you have a history of blogs on there because I have really scoured those and found great encouragement. And I just feel like this is a wonderful outreach to women. And I'm thrilled to be talking to you.
Well, thank you. And I really think there's a wealth of wisdom and inspiration on the blog rolls. And I don't have near as many homemakers as I could if I went and looked for them. But some of them have some brilliant ideas for staying home and what to do. So I want to say goodbye to you now, and I hope you have the lovely rest of your day, and I hope everybody will tune in to this program.
Thank you, Lydia.
Goodbye.
Mm.